All right. So we were reading about this spiritual anatomy, ninth chakra, and we were on the topic of this soul replication. And so if any of you remember the discussion, if you have any questions, we can talk about it. So this concept of spiritual entity came from this book, Whispers. There is a message from what is called spiritual entity, and it's always a question: who is this spiritual entity? And later, Daji clarified it is that Chariji's own spiritual entity giving messages from the higher world. So this concept of spiritual entity sort of evolved from there. And those of you watch this Daji's, there is a recent, what is that thread? Anyone remembers the topic, the golden thread, or it is from that new Whispers book. Anyways, there Daji started saying even his spiritual entity started giving messages. So the concept of the spiritual entity is where, in Daji's words, the master carries the Abhyasi in the womb and delivers in the brighter world. So it is your own. So the concept of split soul. You know why this concept of split soul kind of becomes like a new concept? Because all the scriptures have said the soul is indivisible. Akshara. Kshara means divide, cut, and Akshara means that which cannot be divided. So here we are talking a different concept. But it makes sense in those of you are into quantum physics. There is a concept called quantum entanglement, where they send a photon, they divide a photon and send it to another, miles apart. And whatever the polarity which is applied to this photon, it's automatically applied to the other one. There is no time travel, there is no communication, but both act in coherence. That's the concept of quantum entanglement. It is something similar here. So you cannot say if it is divided. If it is divided, then you are talking in terms of space and time, correct? And you are thinking of something, a quantified entity. But soul is infinite. Okay, so that's why, it's a very, from a multi-dimensional perspective, it is the same. From a conceptual to understand something, then you kind of look at it as two different entities, right? So that's why, there is only one soul, one Atman, embodied into many. So that's the concept here. So here, I mean, when you look at an individual embodied terms, then we are talking about individuality, separateness. When you think of everything as one from a higher dimension, then there is no division, there is no separateness. There are not many entities. It's one entity appearing as many. So it's a very, what should I say, a broad concept depending on how you see it, how you want to perceive it, right? So let's start reading. Again, interrupt me, whenever you have to say something or if you have any question. You don't have to have
Um,
question. I like to for people to share. All right, go
brother.
ahead. Yes, sister.
Um, Okay, so am I understanding this right? That spiritual entity is the same or similar to our soul? It's just another word?
You can say that. See, because now we are looking ourselves as an embodied consciousness. When this embodied consciousness have the spectrum from the lower to the highest, when our embodied consciousness reaches that higher spectrum, then you can call it as a spiritual entity. Until then, it is not a spiritual entity.
Okay, okay, thanks.
So while nurturing is possible, so is neglect. And we often neglect. We often neglect. Why? Because we are not recognizing the essence, importance of it. Though, I mean, we are practicing meditation, we have spent so many years in this practice of meditation. But at the same time, the understanding, the idea is that we are reaping some benefit out of it. And often those benefits are not so easily quantified or apparent, right? Because they are not so apparent, we tend to neglect the spiritual process. We claim we are busy with other things. Why am I busy with other things? Because there is an apparent benefit out of it. Even watching a movie, there is an apparent enjoyment, engaging my senses, right? Seeking some pleasure through those senses, through the movie, right? So it is, we are seeing some benefit out of it. So I am okay to watch a movie rather meditate. I'm not saying we should not be watching a movie, but everything has a time and place. So we neglect. So when it comes to should I go to some activity or should I meditate, we choose the activity. And then we think that by spending time in meditation, we are missing out something in the world. And a lot of people blame their careers for not growing because I subjected myself to meditation. But if they touch their heart and see how much of meditation they have done, we bring the same attitude, even in our worldly activities, the same attitude we bring into meditation, right? So you will observe, if you touch your heart and ask an honest question, you are neither there nor here. You are half hearted in the worldly activities, you are half hearted in meditation. The same character reflects. So even if you have not done the meditation, your career or your financial status or your worldly status would have been the same. But by starting meditation, by developing that discipline and sincerity, automatically it reflects in your worldly activities. That's why the teaching of heartfulness, at least, unlike other systems, from the beginning, from the get go, from the day one, it says a bird with two wings. Unless both the wings are strong, the bird cannot fly. So here we are talking about a spiritual wing and a material wing. If I put too much focus on one wing, the other wing becomes weak. Or if I don't put any focus on both the wings, both of them become weak. Often you'll observe both are weak. It's not that one is strong because you carry the same attitude on both sides. So one cannot say I'm totally engaged in spirituality and I'm neglecting my material life. then you are losing something big in your life. If I say I'm only focused on my material wing and I don't care about the spiritual wing, and then you are missing out big in your life. So both have to be balanced. And again, if you see, the only practice we are doing half hour meditation in the morning, some half hour cleaning in evening, 10 minutes, about 1 hour, you're giving it to spirituality. And you have 23 hours at your disposal, right? So then, so the spirituality doesn't demand much from us. It doesn't demand anything at all. It is our interest and our growth that we have to see that somehow we have to identify what's happening. We have to become sensitive. We have to become aware. Right? In recent topics, Daji brought out these questions from Yaksha Prashna, from one of the episodes in that epic of Mahabharata from Indian story, where this guy is asked many questions. He's supposedly a wise person. And one of the question is why there is ignorance. Kim agnanam. That is in Sanskrit statement, Kim agnanam. And the answer is it is lack of awareness creates ignorance. It is just the awareness. They did not talk about reading all the scriptures, reading all the books in the world. It doesn't talk about doing some meditational practices. It doesn't talk about guru or God or anything. It simply says it's your unawareness is creating ignorance. That means we have to consciously engage in whatever we are doing. When we consciously engage in whatever we are doing, then there is no negligence. Even in a small act of breathing or watching something or eating something or doing something, when it is done with complete awareness, the outcome is different. So, the meditation practice is not about reaching some esoteric God or godly state or divine state, which is often spoken. But the my understanding, the real understanding of meditation is to bring that awareness into every situation so that I'm fully aware of my actions, of the thing I'm doing, small things. When you become aware, then you are become aware of big things. So then we become sensitive to our environment, sensitive to our inner world. Then we can see this progress. Then we can go into the higher spectrum of consciousness. Because today we are not using awareness at all. How can it grow when something is not used? Something is not exercised. How can it grow? So it is to bring that awareness into every state of our being, every state of our actions, every state of our thoughts. Then, it creates some holistic personality in us. Then the material and spiritual is easily balanced. So understand the meditation practice, why we are doing. We are not doing it for a guru, we are not doing it for some god, or we are not pleasing anyone here. We are doing it to increase, improve our awareness. That's why we meditate. Okay. All right. So while nurturing is possible, so is neglect. So if one ends up falling victim to prejudice, hatred, and other negative traits while being stationed at the ninth chakra or higher chakras, then spiritual entity also suffers. So what height one falls from decides how much it hurts. So if we slip while walking on the road, we might get away with a bruise or sprain. But the consequences can be catastrophic if the fall is from the greater heights. So similarly, if the inner compass gets misdirected while you are in the higher regions, the spiritual entity shrivels. It quivers with pain inflicted by heavier vibrations, and it is tormented in other dimension. In some extreme cases, the spiritual entity can even wither away. So this is a spiritual tragedy. But imagine why all this is happening. Is because we are not exercising that awareness. Just because I have reached some higher spiritual spectrum doesn't mean I'm constantly exercising awareness. This could be happening because of the transmission, because the master is trying to push us up. It is all his effort. But our effort is to bring that simple awareness so that when my spiritual condition is altered in a negative way, I must correct it. When its condition is altered in a positive way, I must nurture it. So this is all about nurturing our spiritual condition, but to nurture it, I should be aware. And to be aware, we have to constantly exercise that awareness. And it begins with our meditation. Okay. See, these concepts are simple, but we don't pay attention, and that's why it's somehow we don't recognize them. So, does this mean we keep worrying about mistakes we might make? Living in fear of making mistakes that might cause downfall is not a positive way to approach the goal. Also, if we keep worrying about mistakes, we'll make one sooner or later. So, we should remind ourselves of what brought us here. It is our devotion, loving devotion to the goal made our ascent possible. So we take refuge in devotion and allow that force to continue propelling our progress. So here, an important concept we need to understand is, we are often caught between the righteousness and unrighteousness. But in spirituality doesn't recognize both. It doesn't recognize righteousness nor it recognizes unrighteousness. Why? Because the righteousness or this judgmental attitude coming from a lower spectrum. And the lower spectrum is justifying our actions. A murderer justifies his or her actions and commits it. No one committed anything knowing that it is wrong. There is a justification. Even if they know it, there is a justification. So, through that justification, what we are doing is we are suppressing that awareness. Oh, this is all happening in the lower spectrum. But spirituality says go above, transcend all this righteousness and wrongness. Last week I was talking about this verse to one of the groups. It says Sarvadharman Parityajya. It's from the Gita. It says discard all your righteousness and wrongness. He says discard it completely and then take a refuge in me. Why is he saying that? Because how much ever righteousness you are engaged in or you are subjected to, it is only through a lower spectrum. It is not through the higher spectrum. So the actions performed from the higher spectrum doesn't require justification. doesn't require any what is so called the in our scripture says, it is says viveka buddhi, the discernment is a natural state of mind. Discernment doesn't happen through analysis. Is this I'm going to do this, is it right or wrong? It doesn't do that analysis. Discernment is a natural state where the the action takes place from a higher spectrum. From a lower spectrum, if you observe the action of the higher spectrum, it always feels right. So there is no right or wrong decision over there. It is only what is needed. So that's what Babuji says. Being in tune with nature is means that. Being in tune in with nature means you have discarded all this lower spectrum. You're always functioning from the higher spectrum. You are one with the nature. Nature, whatever it does, there is no discernment there. It is only a requirement and the need of the moment. So that is what the real spirituality is. So all this discernment, understanding, everything begins at the ninth chakra when we reach that conscious spectrum. But here, this paragraph says even at that stage, if you are unaware, the fall is inevitable. So we have to keep that awareness constantly. We cannot neglect. Okay. So we'll just read through this paragraph and then we can get into meditation. So we must be mindful of the banks that allow the river of devotion to flow serenely. Those banks are humility and purity. The famous line that Clint Eastwood character in Dirty Harry speaks the movie, The Magnum Force. A man's got to know his limitations. Rings true here. Humility and purity create awareness of limits. The heart is sensitized. Any slight indication of older condition kicking in triggers warning signs in our heart. Thoughts like, is this right way to think? How should I mend my actions? Am I conducting myself with the right softness of heart? And how will my family or my guru feel about such actions? Help you course correct. But the spiritual entity's prime role is to enhance the potency of our soul. Instead of one working alone, one you have a force multiplier. So there are two of you working in tandem and growing faster. So one more thing to remember, even if it's billions of years away, at the time of final dissolution of the universe, when everything in creation will merge back into the center, the evolved souls with spiritual entities will affect the level of consciousness of the next creation. So even at this level, it's a cycle of life. And even science speaks about it. After this entire universe is dissolved, the Big Bang happens again and the creation begins, right? So anyway, but we we are contributing in so many ways to this world through our meditation, which we cannot even fathom. So I'll stop here for any comments or questions. Then we can get into meditation. And Ravgar, if you're available, can you please give us the session today?
Okay, brother.